Assalamualaikum. Hello. Um, how are you, everyone? I hope you are doing well. So, for this next lecture, the title is Formulation of Research, um, Hypotheses and Objectives. So, the aims of a research paper, the aims of the research paper or the proposal basically are the broad statements of desired outcomes or the general intentions of the research. All right. So the aims of a proposal or your paper basically paint a picture of your research project. You include the aims of your proposal or your research basically of your project basically to emphasize what is to be accomplished and not how it is to be accomplished. So so it addresses the long-term project outcomes and the aims, right, of the proposal and the uh, manuscripts should reflect the aspirations and expectations of the research topic. And then at the same time you have objectives. You have aims and you have objectives. Even though in many papers they are being used interchangeably, right? But according to this resource that I took this content from, objectives are subsidiaries to aims. Objectives are basically steps you are going to take to answer your research questions or specific list of tasks needed to accomplish the goals of the project. So objectives emphasize how aims are to be accomplished. Objective is highly focused and should be feasible. And objective is more immediate project outcomes than aims. Objective should make accurate use of concepts. You remember we talked about concept in the previous lecture. Objectives should be sensible and should be precisely described. And then it should read as an individual statement to convey your intention. Back to aims. This is one example on how you phrase your aim. To critically assess the collection and disposal operations for bulky household waste in order to identify factors which contribute to performance and technical efficiency, right? So the objectives, for example, you can phrase like this: to critically assess bulky waste operations by local authorities, including volumes, types of materials arising in current disposal recovery routes. To classify and evaluate the operations of furniture recovery schemes nationally, to make recommendations to improve the operational effectiveness of and to maximize recovery opportunities of bulky waste collections. So this is the aim, okay, which is phrased in one sentence, and then objectives split the aims into different sentences, right? And aims and objectives should be concise, should be brief, must be interrelated. The aim is what you want to achieve in the long term, and the objective describes the short term goal. How are you going to achieve that aim, right? The objective describes how are you going to achieve that aim, right? And you should be realistic about what you can accomplish in the duration of the project, okay? And you have other commitments too, right? And you should provide you and your supervisors with indicators of how you intend to, number one, approach the literature and the theoretical issues related to your project. You must access your chosen subjects, your respondents, the units, the goods, the service, the machines, and so on and so forth. You need to develop a sampling frame and strategy or rationale for their selection. You need to develop a strategy and design for data collection and analysis, right? You need to deal with ethical, important, and practical problems in your research. But be careful, all right? Be careful. Aims and objectives should not be too vague. It should not be too ambitious, and it should not be too broad. And you should not repeat each other in different terms, all right? And it should not be just a list of things related to your research topic. And aims and objectives should not contradict your methods, right? They should flow nicely together, right? So they should not imply methodological goals or standards of measurement, proof or generalizability of findings that the methods cannot sustain. So, you have aims, you have research questions, you have aims, you have objectives, and you have your methods. They should flow nicely, right? They should complement one another. This is one reference that you can go and you can click the link and go and learn more about this. Okay, let's go to hypothesis, right? Hypothesis, all right? Which you should mention in your proposal what is or are the hypotheses of your study, and you should also write the hypothesis in your paper. Hypotheses are single tentative guesses and good hunches assumed for use in devising theory or planning experiments intended to be given a direct experiment test when possible. Number two, a hypothesis is a conjectural statement of the relation between two or more variables. Hypothesis is a formal statement that represents the expected relationship between independent and dependent variable, okay? A research question is essentially a hypothesis asked in the form of a question, all right? So you can, just remove the question mark and it can become a research hypothesis. Nature of hypothesis. The hypothesis is a clear statement of what is intended to be investigated. It should be specified before research is conducted even, and openly stated in the reporting of the results. And this allows you to identify the research objective, identify the key abstract concepts in the research, and identify its relationship to both problem statement and literature review, right? And a problem cannot be scientifically solved unless it is reduced to a hypothesis form, right? So if you have a hypothesis, You can answer the hypothesis and you can settle the problem, right? If you have a problem and you don't have a hypothesis, then something is wrong somewhere. So hypothesis is a powerful tool of an advancement of knowledge, and it is consistent with existing knowledge and conducive for further inquiry. Nature of hypothesis. Number one, hypothesis can be tested, verifiable or falsifiable. Number two, hypotheses are not moral or ethical questions. They are not. Hypothesis is neither too specific nor too general. It is a predictions of consequences. It is considered valuable even if proven false. So even though your hypothesis is not proven or is proven as false, it still carries values. All right. Right. So next, what are the types of hypotheses? So you have what we call as null hypothesis, where you can design it by hash naught or hash 0 or hash n. It should be subscript, okay? And so hash naught or hash null. An alternative hypothesis, you can design it by hash 1 or hash a. So hash subscript R1 and hash subscript a, okay? Subscript. The null hypothesis. What is the null hypothesis? The null hypothesis represents a theory that has been put forward either because it is believed to be true or because it is to be used as a basis for argument, but has not been proven or has not been proved. And it has serious outcome if incorrect decision is made. So basically, null hypothesis is a theory, right? A theory that you bring forward. So you think it might be true, you think it might not be true, but that's a basis of argument, okay? So you want to prove that which one is correct. The alternative hypothesis, sorry for the spelling mistake there, is a statement of what a hypothesis test is set up to establish. So it is an alternative hypothesis is the opposite of the null hypothesis. So it is reached if the hypothesis null is rejected. Okay, if you reject the null hypothesis, it means alternative hypothesis has got some merit, right? So frequently the alternative hypothesis is the actual desired conclusions of the researcher. And then how do you formulate a hypothesis, all right? Because you need to narrow down your questions so that it can be studied reasonably in a research project. So you can have a deductive or inductive way of doing, from observations to pattern to tentative hypothesis to theory, or from theory to hypothesis to observations and to confirmation. I think many of my research use the inductive way of developing the hypothesis. It means that we start off with a theory, and we have our own hypothesis. We do some observations, and we confirm whether the hypothesis is acceptable or not acceptable. But again, you have another type of research, right? Qualitative research. So so they got some rules. For number one, for example, rule 1 refers to subject researcher. Rule 2 refers to the object of the study. Rule 3 refers to action in relation to the subject research, hence of data collection. Rule 4 refers to the evaluation of information gathered, hence the data analysis. I'm not an expert in qualitative research. In fact, I have not done any qualitative research before, even though I've gone to a few workshops on qualitative research, but I've not done any qualitative research properly. You might want to read the paper that I'm going to suggest to you later to get more information about qualitative research and the hypotheses, the objectives, and whatnot. In quantitative research, quantitative research where you deal with number, you record the response using number. The characteristic include that the testable proposition to be deduced from theory, and you can separate the independent and dependent variables. So you need to understand what are the independent and what are the dependent variables. To be either writing questions, objective or hypothesis, but not combinations. And consider the alternative forms for writing and make a choice based on the audience for research. So that's basically the characteristic of the quantitative approach. How to generate research hypothesis? Okay, you got these initial ideas, which is often vague and general, and you go and do some observations, and at the same time you do some searching of existing research literature, and then you come up with a statement of the problem, and then you proceed with research hypothesis. At the same time, you can develop some operational definitions or of constructs, which at the end both of them will lead to research hypothesis. So, for example, consider the example of a simple association between two variables, y and x. So you got y, you got x, and y and x are associated. Okay, they are association between y and x. Y is related to x, or y is dependent on x. So as x increases, y decreases, or increases in the value of x, appear to affect the reductions in values of y. So the first hypothesis, the first hypothesis, they are, the first hypothesis provides a simple statement of association between y and x, but nothing is indicated about the association that would allow the researcher to determine which variable, y or x, would tend to cause the other variable to change in value, right? It's just a simple statement of association. But the second hypothesis, y is related to x, is also a simple statement. But this time it may be inferred that the values of y are in some way contingent upon the condition of the x variable. The third hypothesis, as x increases, y decreases, is the most specific of the three. Not only does it say that y and x are related, and that y is dependent on x for its value, but it also reveals something more about the nature of association between the two variables. You can use this four-step procedure for hypothesis testing. Number one, you can start off with the hypothesis, null or alternative hypothesis. Then you set the criteria for decision to reject or not to reject the null hypothesis. Then you go and collect your data, and then you evaluate the null hypothesis by doing the statistical analysis. Please read also on type 1 error. Type 1 error occurs when the null hypothesis or hash knot is wrongly rejected. Okay, so it means that we say that we say that there is something, there's some association between A and B, but that conclusion is wrong, right? So that is type 1 error. For example, a type 1 error would occur if we conclude that the two drugs produce different effects when, in fact, there was no difference between them. So we conclude that there are differences, but actually, in the reality, there is no difference. Okay? That is type 1 error. And type 2 error occurs when the null hypothesis, or hash knot, is not rejected when it is, in fact, false. Okay? For example, a type 2 error will occur if it were concluded that the two drugs produce the same effect. We say, okay, the two drugs A and B produce the same effect. That is, there is no difference, right? When in fact they produce different results. Okay, so you have committed type 2 error. So this is a useful table to understand, you know, type 1 error, type 2 error, and making the right decision. So this is a very good reference material for you, okay, by Shalini Prasad, Ajit Rao, and Eshu Rehani. The title of this resource is Developing Hypotheses and Research Questions, which I think I have emailed to all of you. If you have any questions, please email me your questions, and I hope to reply to your questions as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Okay, Assalamualaikum. Bye bye.